Hello everyone, welcome to the daily editorial analysis of the Shankar IAS Academy brought to you by the Civils Media team. So these are the topics for discussion for today's date. So here the first article titled Wild and Safe from the Hindu discusses about the human and animal conflict and its impact and consequences with it. And next article titled The US Pivot from the Indian Express again discusses about de-escalating of the US from the Ukraine and its impacts and consequences related with different global countries and different global power dynamics. So in light of these articles, let us see mains question for each of the article, and we would be moving to the article discussion one by one. Now look into the article, the US pivot, pulling out of Ukraine and thaw with Russia. Thaw is nothing but having a cordial and a very friendship relationships with Russia may help the Washington of the US to focus on the China. So here the article basically discusses about US de-escalating from the Ukraine and its impact on various global countries and various global positions. So in light of this article, let us see the impact and consequences. So the impact basically has its potentiality, especially in the military, especially in the economic and other strategic implications. So before moving into the article, let us see a question. The de-escalation of the USA from the Ukraine can reshape the global power dynamics. So in this context, discuss the consequence of the US withdrawal from the Ukraine. So I ask the aspirants to put in their perspective for this question, and let us see a framework for it now. So first we need to see why US has been de-escalating from the Ukraine. First is to have their focus on China. So there is shifting focus to China for various reasons, such as having their importance on the Indo-Pacific region, which is one of US bigger long-term challenge and bigger long-term goal. So next is having countering China in the South China Sea and in the Taiwan region. So along with having their presence in the Indo-Pacific, they want to have strategies based on countering China through the South China Sea and Taiwan for various strategic importances and freeing the military resources and funds for China strategy. So there has been millions of funds being included in the US involvement with the Ukraine war. So freeing the military resources as well as the funds can be put into the China strategy, including all of these factors. Next reason is war fatigue and domestic politics. So here, as I told before, millions of money has been spent on the Ukraine aid for the regions of Kiev. So due to this there has been declining public and political support. So even the people of the US has been having contentions on how such investments can have impact on their daily life and on their political life. For example, domestic issues such as inflation, death, border security are one of the major issues for the people of the US. So there has been concerns raised by the public on how US need to focus on such more issues. And also coming on the 2024 elections, here cautious leadership has been emerged as that needs to be having importance of leadership given by the US people. So all of the US people are looking into all of these factors, and it might have a consequences in the election. So the leadership model need to be changed by the US in itself. And next reason would be resource constraints and military aid priorities. Here the US stockpiles have been running low for after 2 years of the war, and Pentagon are nothing but they are the leaders of the US. That is can be taken as example of the defense of the US. People involved in the defense of the US, they are known as the Pentagon leaders. So here the Pentagon leaders worries about the Taiwan conflict and its readiness, and the need to have a rebuild of the military production. Here, so the emulations and the weapons being used in the years of 2 years of the war are running low, and there needs to be upgrade in the military production of the US in itself. Next is the stalemate in the Ukraine. That is, there has been no any changes. It's been very stale, it's been very constant. Here no significant breakthroughs are happening for either of the side, and that is both the US as well as the Ukraine, as well as involvement of Russia sometime, and having limited strategic gains. So instead of having uneasy exit by by the US, the US have decided to have a diplomatic exit strategy. Next is realigning relationships with the Russia. So here there are some policymakers of the US, they prefer having friendships with the Russia. So to lessen down the tensions here, they bringing in the weakening of Russia and China partnership. So when they are having a friendly relationship with the Russia, it has ultimate impact in the Russia and China partnership. So countering China can also be having a favoritism for US. So this stands as a classic US strategy where they prevent Russia and China alliance. And finally, the European burden sharing here. The US wants the NATO allies to take more responsibility, and countries like the Germany and France, they slow on the military spending. So US wants the Europe also to be involved in the war more than US being involved in itself. So here the US brings in the pullback of forces of the Europe to step up in the need of the Ukraine as well as in the war regions. So the European countries such as the Germany and France are having slow on the military spending, and they are having much of dependence on the US for the aid of the military production. So in US doesn't want such dependency on them, and they want the Europe countries to take in up more responsibilities. So these are the reasons why US has de-escalated from Ukraine. Now let us see Russia and US relationship. So looking into the Cold War, which happened in 1947 and 1991, it was most of having hostility. So you know how Russia and US are one of having a bipolar differences, especially in terms of ideology, military and economic. So we all know that how Russia and US are having ideological clash of capitalism versus communism. So in the era of Cold War, some key events such as the nuclear arms race and Cuban Missile Crisis can be as a key changer. Next, having proxy wars such as involving Korea, Vietnam and Afghanistan can be one of the key events. And finally leading to the Soviet Union, which is in the year of 1999, where US established to be one of the sole superpower. So after the Cold War, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, there has been fragile engagement here. From 1991 to 2014, there has been there has been initial cooperation from the disintegrated Russian countries, where it implicated NATO's expansion. So here countries like the Poland, Czech Republic and Hungary joined the NATO in 1999, and so US had their initial hopes in including the missile defense in Europe, but it led to Russia's opposition. Ultimately, this didn't get a breakthrough. Again, Russia and US relationship were having a more hostile relationship, where in 2008 Russia and Georgia war happening, as US try to exceed their NATO relationships, and Georgia is also having their security borders with the US, and it led to West and Russia tensions. And now in 2014 present, having open confrontations. In 2014, Russia has annexed Crimea, and it led to US and EU sanctions on them. And in 2016, the US accused Russia of election interference, and in 2022, Russia invades Ukraine, and the NATO expansion has been leading, especially to countries such as Finland and Sweden. Now let us look into the key areas of conflict. First is the Ukraine war and NATO expansion. So having US aid such as weapons, intelligence and economic support, this stood as a problem. And next is Russia sees NATO expansion as the most existential threat for them. Now looking into energy and economic sanctions, the US and the EU, that is the European Union, sanctions on the Russian oil, banking and other technological services have been an area of conflict. Russia has cut the gas connection and gas supply to the Europe, and it had strengthened more ties with China and India. So looking into the military and nuclear rivalries here, US and Russia, when it comes to US and Russia, almost 90% of the world's nuclear weapons are being controlled by them, and having arms control treaties such as the START, which is the Strategic Arms Research Training, have been weakening. So here the risk of nuclear armed race can have its increase all again. Next, Russia expanding military ties with China, Iran and North Korea is seen as an, again here for US it's seen as an existential threat. Now let us see the impact of US de-escalation from Ukraine. First, let us look into the impact of Ukraine in itself. They have been relying on US, having heavy reliance on US aid such as the weapons and ammunition. So here it might weaken their defense due to that. Next, they are forced into peace talks, which will be definitely in unfavorable terms, and the NATO countries may reduce their support. Next, looking into the impact on Russia. For Russia, it's a major win. Here, they again, for them, it would be proved as how the Western unity is not permanent for them, and how they are always having a hostile relation with the Western side. And Moscow pushes for ceasefire on its term, and here NATO divisions were exposed. Here, more leverage in the Eastern Europe would be having by the Russia. Now, looking on the impact on Europe and NATO, here Europe must step up their military aid for if the US has been de-escalating. Here Germany and France, such as the European countries, would bringing in lead support for the Kiev, and weak NATO response such as the Baltic regions, that are the Baltic countries, such as those are the, we all know, the Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. So here we all know how weakening of the NATO's response would bring in the Russian in future to have threats on the Baltic regions especially, and on the Poland. So here the internal NATO divisions over Ukraine aid would be in collapse. Now, looking into impact on the US, here the Indo-Pacific region would be their main priority. Next is having shift resources to counter China. Here includes Taiwan and South China Sea, and over $100 billion have been spent on Ukraine aid. So it obviously brings in the pullback as it eases their financial strain. And looking into risks, the allies see US as unreliable on Europe and Taiwan. Now, looking into impact on China, here stronger Russia and China partnership would be disturbed by the Western Bloc. Here US pivoting to Asia, here for goals of having more arms for Taiwan and their military expansion. And Russia and the West truce, that is their tensions, would have impact on Moscow, where they would be less dependent on China. Now, looking into the impact on India, here less US pressure to cut ties with Russia has a larger impact for our country, India. India balances both Russia and West relationships. So India has to bring in strategic importance to maintain both of these countries' relations. If Russia depends too much on China, it might has hindrance on India's influence as it weakens its relationship with China. And the US and India defense, ultimately it increases the economic ties and it strengthens. So I hope the article is clear. So in every way, through every countries, every countries are having their own strategic means to bring in their global power. So moving to the next article here, titled Wild and Safe. So this article discusses about the animal and human conflict due to various reasons such as habitat fragmentation, unregulated tourism and other invasive species. So this news is especially for the place of Kerala, and how the state Kerala has brought in mitigation measures and also other community participation in order to tackle this situation, as it involves both the wildlife as well as the people associated with it. So in light of this article, let us see a means framework question. Human wildlife conflict, that is the HWC, is an increasing challenge in India driven by habitat fragmentation, climate change and human encroachment. So we all can see how even smallest of things can be as a reason for the human and wildlife conflict. So here discuss the socio-economic and ecological impacts of the HWC and suggest effective policy measures which can be taken and other community-based strategies to mitigate such conflicts. So first let us see what is HWC, human wildlife conflict. So human wildlife conflict, it is a interaction between humans and wildlife. Wildlife, you can take in everything associated with the environment, especially animals. Here it which leads to negative consequences for either of the parties. So here either the human or the animal, or both the human and animal would be affected in a negative consequences. So it occurs when the wild animals, they pose as a threat to these factors such as the human life, such as for the wild livelihoods and for the properties associated with them, and in response humans also take in their actions that harm the wildlife and their associated populations or their habitats. So there is, as I told before, there is negative consequences of human or the animal or both of them in their population especially. So first we need to see the causes of human wildlife conflict. First is the habitat loss and fragmentation. Here we can take the example of many man-made intrusions such as the deforestations, urban expansion, and involvement of or influx of population due to migration and other uh, city making developments and other urban cities development. So these are one of the main reason for having human and animal conflict. Next is climate change. For example, you can take the altered weather. We can take for example of the heat waves, which is a current threat. We can take in the example of food and water scarcity. So there is food insecurity can also lead to the causes of human and animal conflict, where the wildlife in itself comes in search of the food and water in case their environment is not able to provide. Next is human encroachments. Here for example, building of infrastructure such as road making, such as bridge making and other network connectivities projects, and such as roads, dams and so on, can uh, irritate the wildlife, animals and its nature. Next is food scarcity. Here for example, you can take overgrazing, where their whole habitat is being destroyed, having monoculture, and next is their pre-depletion. So not having their own food can also make them to come into the places where the humans live for their own food in itself. And next is invasive species. So here we all know how the invasive species stands as a disruption for the whole ecosystem itself, where they disturb the whole habitat of the endemic species sometimes. So for example, you can take this invasive species, which is the Senna spectabilis. So here they are one of the most dangerous invasive species, and there has been a lot of news where they stand as a threat to the whole environment. And so these flowers we all have seen naturally in lot of trees around all of us. So here for examples which happened in India, we can take animal and human conflicts in Kerala. Here they disturb the crops and there is crop raiding, and also because of that there is shrinking of forests. It stands as a reason for them. Next is leopard encounters in the Maharashtra, where in the urban sightings there have been sightings of the leopard due to the habitat fragmentation, and tigers in Sundarbans especially, where due to the human settlements as well as the rising sea levels due to the climate change can stand as a reason for the HWC. So these are very a lot of among lot of examples. These are just three examples. Now we can see the impact. First is the loss of human life and injuries. So animals involving elephants, leopards and snakes have high stakes on bringing in loss for the human life and bringing in injuries. So when there is injuries, there need to be availability of medical aid, especially in rural areas, even to afford a primary healthcare hospital. They sometimes they need to travel for kilometers, so this can also hinder their opportunity to get a medical aid. Next impact would be having crop and livestock damage. Here for example, wild boars, elephants and nilgai. So nilgai is a bull, so they almost destroy all of the crops and the livestock present of the human. Next is they bring in infrastructure damage. Here the houses, roads, the power lines are totally disrupted by the animal conflict. And finally it stands as a threat to the conservation. Here due to all of this, there is always a negative perception has been created on the humans, on the animals. So there is always this tension between all of the humans as well as the animals, and finally it has negative perception, where there is at one point we as a human would be taking the decision to destroy the animals, or we'll be taking it as a revenge. Now looking into the economic loss, here definitely there are financial losses for the farmers. Their crop are being destructed, their livestock have been hammered, and and predation, where we all know that the predator would be killing the prey. And next is having government expenditure, where there has been lot of investments and expenditures been involved, such as bringing in compensation money for whoever have lost their lives as well as their property, and also having expenditure on mitigation of the humans to more safer places. So here, for example, almost 52 crore has been spent on the government expenditure for the compensation and mitigation. Next is psychological and social impact. Of course, there are stress and anxiety and fear of the attacks by the human, and also retaliatory killings of animals. Here they almost go into the stage of having revenge. You can see how, how elephants are one of the most intelligent animals of the earth, and they will be having the uh, revenge kind of behavior when it comes to killing of their infants or their group of animals by the humans. Next would be biodiversity and ecological imbalance finally. So here there is disruption of the food chains because of the predation, and also and the ecosystem, where this increased conflicts are happening due to the habitat fragmentation. Now let us see. So this has been a lot of an issue in the state of Kerala. So Kerala has brought in their own human wildlife conflict classification. Here Kerala is one of the first state to bring in specific state specific disaster management under the Disaster Management Act of 2020, 2005 for addressing the human wildlife conflict. So they bring in faster relief element, where they include state disaster response fund for bringing in investments and funds to take care of the HWC. Next, there are better coordination between different departments. We have many local departments and other departments related to forest, as well as involvement of police also. Next, there is stronger prevention and infrastructure has been involved. For example, fencing, then bringing in trenches to tackle the encroachment of elephants. There are improved compensation, so there are more involvement of money as well as funds in mitigation as well as in the compensation facilities. And finally, there is community involvement, as without understanding of the humans and their co-participation, I don't think this would be possible. Looking into government measures to address the human wildlife conflict, first is having a policy framework and guidelines. So here there is a national human wildlife conflict mitigation strategy, where they bring in a structured approach to have rapid response especially, and having teams for the compensation and mitigation process. So the government measures on an Indian level, they have brought in these initiatives. Next is having species specific guidelines of 2023. So in 2023, the Ministry of Foreign and Forest, Environment and Climate Change have brought in 14 guidelines for conflicts with species like elephant, leopard, snakes and so on. Next is the standard operating procedures. So here they stand as a management to manage the encounters which are done by the elephant, leopards and so on. So here bring in more efficient and timely response when it comes to human and animal conflict, especially tiger and leopard conflict. So here the SOPs, for example, used in the Bandhavgarh of the Madhya Pradesh, here for the tiger relocation, here they brought in the involvement of the SOPs for even more timely and effective responses. Next would be having financial support and compensation. There are a lot of centrally sponsored schemes such as Project Tiger, Project Elephant, and which stands as a aid for conflict and mitigation processes. Next is having compensation mechanisms. The government provides a lot of aids for many casualties which is due to the animals, and also of the livestock and crop losses. Next measure would be community engagement and capacity building. Here, for example, anti-depredation squads. Depredation is mean attacking. So here they bring in squads, especially in states like in Bengal, Assam, to prevent wildlife intrusions. Next, having public awareness program. Campaigns on the importance of coexistence and safety are being prioritized. For example, we take Gajayatra. It's a initiative by the Wildlife Trust of India as well as in collaboration with the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change for elephant conflict mitigation. And finally, habitat, when it comes to habitat conservation and restoration, here they bring in protected area networks such as a lot of national parks, sanctuaries and community reserves having habitat enrichment, so it avoids habitat fragmentation. So here water and the other fodder availabilities in the forest are being enriched so that the animals would be able to have their food security, as they won't be intruding the mainland of people. For example, here Karnataka Forest Department have created the artificial water holes in Bandipur to prevent elephant migration. And next is having technological advancements. Here, for example, we have a lot of early warning systems for apps, alerts and notify communities. For example, Suraksha app of Odisha, it warns the locals about the elephant movements. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you are at the end of the video. Don't forget to give a like, comment and a share, and to further not to miss any other content, subscribe to our channel. Thank you and have a nice day.